Imagine someone breaks into your home in the middle of the night, threatens you and your wife, and you fight back. You tell the police exactly what happened, and you're still charged with murder. That's what happened to Rodolfo Olarbe in the Philippines. It began shortly after midnight on May 7, 2006. Olarbe and his common-law wife, Juliet, were asleep when a gunshot suddenly woke them. Outside was Romeo Arca. According to Olarbe, Arca appeared to be drunk. He was carrying a rifle and shouting threats. Then Arca forced his way inside and pointed the rifle at them. Olarbe grabbed the gun. The two men struggled until Olarbe managed to take it away. He then fired at Arca, hitting him in the head. But the confrontation wasn't over. Olarbe said Arca reached for the bolo at his waist and turned toward Juliet. So Olarbe went after him. The two men struggled again, this time over the blade. They eventually reached the outer portion of the house, where Olarbe managed to take control of the bolo. He then hacked Arca. Arca died from the gunshot and hacking injuries. What Olarbe did next would become important to the case. At around 12:30 in the morning, he went to the Louisiana police station and surrendered. He told the officers that he had killed Arca. The police went to the scene and found Arca's body and the bolo. Olarbe was booked, arrested, and detained. But surrendering to the police didn't end the matter. He was charged with murder, and his defense was simple. He said he had been protecting himself and Juliet. The case went to the regional trial court in Santa Cruz, Laguna. The trial court didn't accept Olarbe's claim of self-defense. The main problem was what happened after the gunshot. Olarbe said Arca was still able to reach for his bolo and attack Juliet, but the trial court found that difficult to believe. Arca had already been shot in the head. So the court concluded that the initial aggression had ended. If Arca was already weakened and subdued, then Olarbe's decision to hack him could no longer be considered self-defense. The RTC convicted Olarbe of murder. The court also considered his immediate surrender as a mitigating circumstance and sentenced him to a minimum of 20 years and 1 day of imprisonment, up to reclusion perpetua. Olarbe appealed. The Court of Appeals agreed with the trial court and affirmed the conviction on March 22, 2016. But Olarbe continued his appeal. The case eventually reached the Supreme Court, and the central question became, had Arca's attack actually ended when Olarbe shot him? The Supreme Court took a closer look at that assumption. The lower courts had concluded that the gunshot must have left Arca too weak to continue fighting. But the Supreme Court found a problem. There was no credible evidence establishing that the shot had actually made Arca incapable of attacking again. The court noted that nothing in the record established Arca's physical condition after the shot. So concluding that he could not have continued with the bolo was, in the Supreme Court's view, speculation. And that changed the picture. If Arca was still capable of attacking, then taking the rifle away had not necessarily ended the danger. According to Olarbe's account, Arca reached for his bolo and turned toward Juliet. Olarbe was forced to struggle with him again. The Supreme Court found this account plausible and consistent with the sequence of events. More importantly, the court concluded that Arca's aggression was continuous and persistent, from forcing his way into the home with the rifle to attacking Juliet with the bolo. That brought the court to the law of self-defense. There are 3 basic requirements. First, there must be unlawful aggression. Second, the response must have been reasonably necessary to prevent or repel that aggression. And third, the person claiming self-defense must not have sufficiently provoked the attack. Olarbe was also claiming that he had acted to defend Juliet. For the Supreme Court, the first requirement was clear. Arca had arrived armed. He had fired the rifle, he had threatened the occupants, he had forced his way inside. And after losing the rifle, he continued the confrontation with the bolo. The court found that this was not simply a threat, it was an ongoing armed assault. But there was still another question. Olarbe had shot Arca and then hacked him. Was that response reasonably necessary? The Supreme Court said that reasonable necessity does not mean perfect necessity. Someone facing an immediate attack doesn't have the time or peace of mind to calmly calculate exactly how much force is enough. The court said the situation has to be judged from the perspective of the person facing the danger at that moment, not from the perspective of someone examining the event afterward. Olarbe was inside his home. It was the middle of the night. Juliet was also in danger, and according to the evidence accepted by the court, Arca was still attacking. So Olarbe's actions had to be considered in the context of that emergency. The court also considered the number of wounds inflicted on Arca. Ordinarily, numerous wounds could raise a question about whether someone had gone beyond what was necessary. But in this case, the Supreme Court noted that most of the wounds were described as lacerations, and their nature and extent had not been sufficiently explained. The court therefore found it unfair to conclude, based only on the number of wounds, that Olarbe's response had been unreasonable. Then there was what Olarbe did after the killing. He didn't disappear. He went directly to the police station. He surrendered, and he told the police about his involvement. The Supreme Court considered that conduct consistent with his claim that he had acted to protect himself and Juliet, rather than from revenge or resentment. There was also no showing that Olarbe had provoked Arca's aggression. On July 23, 2018, the Supreme Court reversed the Court of Appeals. Rodolfo Olarbe was acquitted on the grounds of self-defense and defense of a stranger. The court declared him not civilly liable to Arca's heirs and ordered his immediate release unless he was being held for another lawful cause. Olarbe was finally free. But by then, more than 12 years had passed since the night he surrendered to police in May 2006. And that leaves a difficult question. What do you give someone back after more than a decade spent fighting a murder conviction, only for the country's highest court to decide that the killing was justified?